So everyone's been talking about how witty and hilarious the new Philippine Airlines safety video is. But here are some details you might have missed if you're only focusing on the oxygen masks and the life jacket lighting up with a single tear. As someone who's part of the Filipino diaspora, born and raised in Singapore, one of my favorite things about Filipino culture is our sense of humor, and hugot is a big part of it. It actually kills me that the rest of the world just knows that Filipinos are funny, but not why we are funny. Very hard to translate hugot because there's no direct comparison. I would say that hugot is a kind of double entendre, which pulls emotional and dramatic truths out of very ordinary observation. One example would be, our love is like internet connection. Sometimes you have it and sometimes it's gone. In fact, the use of double meanings is such a quintessential part of Filipino humor that it extends beyond just hugot. For example, if that's the case, pencil case. To a non-Filipino speaker, it makes no sense, but I don't know, I can't really explain why this is so funny to me. I guess it's the sheer absurdity of the joke that really sells it, because it's kind of like, it is what it is, you know? If that's the case, pencil case. Returning to hugot, what makes it so funny is the fact that there are multiple levels of humor embedded within the joke. You laugh the first time because you think it's funny, and in the background your brain is doing some work to realize that, hey, there's another level of humor in this. And when you realize it, you laugh even more because of how clever and how witty the joke is. It doesn't even have to be super deep. It can be touch and go. To use everyone's favorite example, when Anton comes and says, "Stop the wedding," the narrator says, "Should there be a change in cabin pressure?" And then immediately the oxygen masks drop. It's so funny not only because you wouldn't expect to see oxygen masks in a church, right? But more importantly, because our brain pieces together the fact that they are playing on the concept of cabin pressure. There's this sort of double meaning, right? Cabin pressure, literally, and also this, heightened tension because of what Anton has just done. And of course, this sense of humor isn't universal, right? It's something that's so uniquely Filipino, which doesn't mean that not everyone will get it, right? I'm sure that many people, non-Filipinos included, found the video very funny. It's definitely a type of humor that not everyone is used to. So in order for this video to work, the video has to kind of bring people into this realm and this world and convince them slowly and kind of guide them through how this humor works. The beginning of the video actually starts out in a way that's pretty typical for contemporary in-flight safety videos today, where you see elements of the plane being embedded within a different setting. And this is nothing new. It's been done by many other airlines before. For example, Cathay Pacific and New Zealand all the way back in 2014, and even British Airways. So we begin the video thinking it's going to be similar to those other videos we've seen before. You'll notice that the plot is actually pretty straightforward. Very typical love triangle kind of story, which not unique to the Philippines for sure. So many telenovelas all over the world have some kind of, love triangle. Rich daughter in love with someone from a poor background and her family wants her to marry the rich guy. Titanic, Romeo and Juliet, so many. At first, the safety features are woven in a way that's very incidental to the story. Louisa just happens to be walking down this corridor, making it a convenient way for us to talk about clearing the aisles and exit rows of any items. And this is a point where the integration between the safety features and the plot of the story slowly starts getting ramped up for two reasons. First of all, we see the breaking of the fourth wall between the characters of the story and the flight attendant, who up to this point we've always assumed was kind of in our world, right? She's communicating with us. She's not been interacting with any of the characters. And this is really clever because not only is the fourth wall being broken between the flight attendant and the characters, but also it implies that there's no wall between the characters and us, and it is beckoning to us to really listen to the instructions being given, because they don't apply just to the characters, but to us as well. This is unlike the usual telenovela where there's a huge focus on world building, and as the viewers, we are expected to kind of immerse ourselves in that universe and to kind of pretend while we are watching that everything that's happening there is real and that we are transported into that universe. This one, on the other hand, is drawing attention to the constructedness of the video. In other words, it's drawing attention to the fact that this video was made up and it's not reality. And this is further supported by the use of anachronisms. Anachronisms are objects depicted in a story which actually belong to a different time period from the story that's currently being told. And they are used either because of inexperienced writers or for humorous effect intentionally. In addition to the obvious anachronisms, which is the parts of the plane, right? Here you see a very obvious anachronism in the vase. Which brings me to the second reason why this part is so clever and makes me realize that actually there are three, not two like I said before. So the second part about what makes this so effective is the fact that, vapes are a relatively recent phenomenon, and we all know that smoking is not allowed on flight, but somehow people need to be reminded time and again that vaping is not allowed on planes. So the humor that results from seeing a vape within a context that's supposed to be olden days really helps to drive home the point that, hey, vaping is not allowed on this flight. The third thing that's so clever about this is the fact that this vape scene is not just incidental, right? It moves the story forward. It's not an essential plot point, but it really serves to illustrate the difference in the power dynamics and the relationships between the characters. Here, we see the father offering a cigar to Diego, and he refuses, saying that he'll vape instead. Within the world of the story, it's telling us that Luisa's family and Diego come from slightly different social background. Yes, they are both evidently of the noble class, but Diego has the power to reject, a nice gesture by Luisa's father. Cigars are supposed to be a symbol of wealth, depending on the kind of cigar. And Diego obviously occupies a slightly higher social class because he's able to just reject Luisa's father when he offers the cigar. Now, this detail is definitely not a crucial plot point, but it definitely contributes to the storytelling and world building. We're not even halfway through the video, but you see how many different layers there are to this. Moving on to the next scene, I actually laugh. And I'm surprised that no one's picking up on this. But we see Luisa trying to call Anton, and again we see an anachronism in the smartphone. And then we see that her mother takes it from her. At this point, it still feels very much like they're just doing storytelling rather than telling us about any safety feature. This is immediately flipped around by showing us the mother turning on airplane mode on Luisa's phone. Again, there's dual function here. In the level of the plot, the mother doesn't want Luisa to be contacted by Anton, also serving as a reminder for us to turn our mobile devices to airplane mode. We then see them fighting each other for the phone, and it drops in between the plane seat, before reminding us not to try adjusting the seat, to ask a cabin crew member for assistance instead. And again, here we see a breaking of the fourth wall between the characters and the flight attendant, as if to say this is to be expected moving forward. This breaking of the fourth wall also serves to reinforce the expected behavior for passengers. So if we really were to drop our phones in between seats, we'll remember the character being like, "Iha," and we would feel less embarrassed about asking the flight attendant to help us. This scene is so underrated. First of all, I found it so funny that the mother's words were, "Pakilagay nga itong power bank sa kompartamento." Throughout the video, we see them speaking really pure Tagalog that's super old-fashioned. Most people these days would speak a mix of Tagalog with, some loan words from English peppered in, or even Taglish, which is equal parts Tagalog and English. So we see that throughout the video, a register of Tagalog that is very old-fashioned is being used, really immersing us in this world. And then now we see power bank as an anachronism again. So there's just something funny and dissonant about hearing the words power bank and compartamento together. And then we see this scene serving a function that's really educational because power banks being banned on flights. This is a relatively recent phenomenon. And of course, we can't expect everyone to have Googled every single new rule when they board a plane. Still, they have to comply. So this is a really effective way of reminding people who already know and educating those who don't. In the original video, I saw many people in the comment section being surprised that you can't even charge the power bank or you can't even use it to charge your phone, which really is a clear sign that the video has done its job. And this scene is so masterfully done, chef's kiss. It's definitely an intentional choice to have the mother be the one buckling the seatbelt on the bride. And again, it serves a dual function here because we see how the seatbelt is meant to be fastened, while also moving the story along because we see that the daughter is so reluctant to get married and we see that the mother is the one forcing the daughter to do so. I burst out laughing at the next part because the mother is the one helping to fasten the seatbelt, whereas the daughter is the one loosening the seatbelt and undoing it. Again, dual function because we see how the daughter really does not want to get married. Really chef's kiss for this entire part. This is for your own good, Luisa. Not just the seatbelt, but also getting married to Diego. This is classic Hugot, right? The double meaning in this is for your own good, Luisa. I don't know if I'm weird, but I was wheezing with laughter at this part. And how they integrated the separate instructions for business class passengers was so masterfully done as well. It really drives the story forward by not only showing us how it is done, but also contributing to the world building by showing us viewers that Diego is from a different social background from Luisa and her family, which is why they want her to get married to him so badly. The writers were so clever for the decision of having them go down a bumpy road to mirror turbulence. So picking up where we left off with the wedding, obviously everyone's well aware of this part and what makes it so funny. And in my previous video, I talk about how the moments leading up to this part really help to set up the kind of humor that not all audiences would be used to. And by this point, even a non-Filipino audience member would have already gotten used to the kind of humor that is being leveraged in this video, such that immediately after the narrator says, should there be a rapid change in cabin pressure and the oxygen masks drop, they would find it funny not just because it's weird to see oxygen masks in a church and it's not believable, but also because they know that this is supposed to be a joke. And it's supposed to be funny because your brain would register the overlap between what is being narrated in terms of the flight safety video as well as what's happening at the level of the story. Even the music comes together to reflect the heightened tension that the entire video has been leading up towards. And the humor helps us to really pay attention to the video for details such as, first, it doesn't have to be inflated in order for oxygen to be flowing through, and second, help ourselves before helping others. At this point, we'll all be too busy laughing at the oxygen mask joke to register the fact that here it's also quite clever for them to mirror, the emergency exit thing with Luisa and Anton making an emergency exit out of the church. I found this top-down view of the church being superimposed with the graphic of the plane really clever and very visually neat. And again, if you look at the words more closely, it's really funny. Locate the nearest exit, which may be behind you. Imagine yourself as one of the guests of the wedding. Behind you. Yeah, that's where Anton and Luisa are running towards. Every single detail after the oxygen mask joke really serves to compound the humor. Like individually, all of these details are definitely not as big compared to the oxygen mask joke, but it's also tightly woven together that it creates a cumulative effect, right? Almost kind of like there's a climax and then further crescendo to make everything so boisterous and over the top. You see Luisa proceeding to remove her jewelry, which mirrors how in an emergency we should leave all our belongings behind, no matter how expensive they are. And I don't know about y'all, but I was wheezing with laughter by the time she started taking off her shoes. And by this point, I was wheezing with laughter because I pay attention to other flight safety videos as well, and I definitely remember very clearly them saying that women should remove their high heels or, their heeled shoes before jumping down the emergency slide. So it's really clever that the video is telling us to remove all sharp objects from our body while Luisa is doing the same. I think what's so effective about the humor in this part of the video is how it really maximizes every single aspect and element of what you would usually expect of a wedding scene and doubles it up to parallel the safety instructions, which so clever, who got to the max. Leave everything behind during evacuation as she tosses the bouquet of flowers behind. You see that not a single moment is wasted because they really practice the concept of economy of words. And this is a really good example of how they are really not wasting a single moment by being super economical with the visuals and what we see. We see that this moment is driving the plot along while also showing us how we should be bracing in the event of an emergency, depending on what different seat category we have. And they're not really doing anything new with the humor because we've seen this before, right? With the double meaning and the symbols. And by this point, we are so fully invested in the story because we want to know what happens next. And because the level of humor here lulls a little bit, we kind of subconsciously think, okay, the worst is over, right? We've already had the funniest moments. Now let's focus on the story. Case in point, I think this moment is supposed to be funny as well, with everyone coming out as the narrator is saying, only inflate the life vest outside of the aircraft. And we see them coming out of the church. Because the level of humor pales in comparison to the oxygen masks that we just saw, we kind of forget about the humor a little bit and focus on the story. So by this point, we have been so disarmed as far as the humor is concerned, and we are fully focused on the story and seeing what happens next. We think it's going to be a happy ending, the end. So we never would have guessed that the writers actually have a few more tricks up their sleeves. I don't actually think that this joke is as funny as the one about the oxygen mask. Because of how we have been so emotionally disarmed, we look at this ridiculous idea of a single tear activating the life vest. And, I don't know, it made me laugh even more. I would say that this particular joke in isolation isn't actually super clever. Unlike the preceding jokes, there is no double entendre, double meaning going on. But because we've already bought into the type of humor, we're able to look at this very absurd image and continue laughing because, there's momentum from all the laughter that had just taken place. Which brings us to a scene that kind of serves as the epilogue of the story, where we see what happens after happily ever after. And you might realize that this whole part isn't really funny at all because they've already dished out all the humor to us. So what's happening now is actually the video taking us back from their world into our current reality. The flight safety video shouldn't just be funny for the sake of being funny, but it's supposed to also serve the function of getting us to remember not only what happens in the event of an emergency, but also what we are supposed to be doing right now as the plane is preparing to take off. Based on my observation of the flights that I've been on, one of the things that flight attendants typically have to do a bit more reminding for people to do is to kind of, make sure the window shade is raised, make sure that the tray in front of them is secured, making sure that all gadgets are put away so they don't cause any interference. I would say that from my observation at least, this is probably the number one thing that flight attendants are having to remind people to do before takeoff and before landing. So while this final part is not meant to be funny, it's kind of a nice way of bringing us back from the story into reality, and it's a very nice segue from the safety video into a very neat call to action for us to do right now before takeoff. I've seen people in the comments complain that the video is a bit too long, but realistically speaking, it does just occupy the time that we'd be spending just waiting for takeoff. So I don't really think that's a huge issue at all. However, I think it's a very fair question for people to ask if the humor actually serves as a distraction rather than actually helping people retain any of the information. It's even something that academics have asked about before. In my next video, I'll compare the Philippine Airlines video to other examples by Singapore Airlines, Cathay Pacific, British Airways to answer this question, to see whether the Philippine Airlines video achieves its purpose of really getting people to remember the information or if it's just a distraction. So you can either follow to stay tuned for the next video or you can just trust in your FYP to bring you back to me. So